You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Athan Hristodulu.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Greeks Gridiron. I am your host, Athan Hristodulu, and today we are going to be discussing my top 5 wide receivers heading into the 2021 season. Before we get things rolling, as always, if you enjoy the content that we're doing here, like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll be doing all the positions. I got a 32-team power ranking that's coming up closer to the start of the preseason. A lot of stuff we got coming your way, so do not miss out on any of the content. Now, before we get things rolling, I have an honorable mentions list that I want to start with. Again, this is only a top 5, very hard to put together. There's a handful of receivers that I do want to honorably mention and make note of that are just outstanding receivers that just barely missed out on this list. I want to shout out Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, Tyreek Hill, and Calvin Ridley, both serious considerations for this list. I want to stress an honorable mention to Julio Jones, who, if I was making something bigger than this list, would probably be number 6 on the list. This is a guy that, has been absolutely dominant his entire career up until this past season where he only had 771 yards. I don't think he had anything less than like 1,200 in a season since 2012. I mean, the dude's an absolute freak of nature. You ask anyone in the league, they consider him a top 3 receiver minimum. And honestly, if it wasn't for last year, he'd probably be in this top 3 of the list here. I had a really hard time leaving him off the list, but there's just so many emerging wide receivers. And now with him being in Tennessee, I feel like the focus is still A.J. Brown, who is somebody that is emerging on that team, and you cannot deny his talent. And now that Julio Jones is going to be there, I think A.J. Brown is only going to blossom more, and it's just going to make him an even greater wide receiver, having less attention being thrown his direction. Now, with the actual list itself, we just mentioned the number 5 guy, so we'll go right into it. At number 5, I have the teammate of Julio Jones, A.J. Brown. This is a guy who, in my opinion, has not gotten quite the love he deserves from some people around the league. I've been watching him since he went into Tennessee. I am a Colts fan, so I've watched him very closely as a Colts fan. I love what he does. I love the way he plays, his style. He is a dominant receiver who is only going to get better, especially having somebody like Julio Jones lining up alongside him. Derrick Henry, a great compliment in the running game, and someone like Ryan Tannehill, who since coming to Tennessee and starting for them a couple of years ago has become an absolute stud of a quarterback. This is somebody that everyone thought, was terrible over in Miami, but has really come to flourish in this Tennessee offense. And with the addition of Julio Jones, I think the sky is the limit with this offense in Tennessee. And I have a strong feeling that A.J. Brown, who, coming off of 1,075 yards off of only 70 receptions, he has an absurd yards per reception rating of 15.4 yards per catch. That's ridiculous. It's actually second highest on my top 5 list here. He also had 11 touchdowns. I mean, you want to talk about the running game being threatening in Tennessee? Like, here we go with the passing game now that Julio Jones is there, and there's going to be less attention on A.J. Like, who do you double cover at that point? You can't. You have A.J. Brown on one side and then Julio Jones, who's been an all-time great, on the other. Like, good luck. Tennessee is going to be a problem, and I know you Colts fans out there will probably agree with me. It's going to be tough to watch that Tennessee offense play, and I have those games circled for this season, and I'm a little bit nervous for them. I know the defense is good in Indianapolis, but I mean, you cannot deny the structure of this offense in Tennessee right now. Things are looking very good for them. Now, coming in at number 4, rookie, absolutely dominant. I almost didn't put Justin Jefferson on this list because part of the way I weight the wide receivers on this list are through career production as well. It's not, and I'm not talking like something they did 8 years ago, but, within the last few years, just how dominant have they been? Have they been consistent? Every year it seems like there's always like, a couple of 1 or 2 hit wonders where they pop up for a couple of years and go away. But I mean, Justin Jefferson absolutely dominating the wide receiver position as a rookie the way he did, having one of the most outstanding rookie wide receiver years in NFL history, 1,400 yards on the dot, the highest number on this here for yards per reception at 15.9. The dude almost averaged 16 yards a catch. That's ludicrous. 7 touchdowns. He caught 70.4% of the passes thrown his way, and his 1,400 yards is off of 88 total receptions. It's second lowest on the list, only behind A.J. Brown, who is at 70. So, I mean, this is a guy that I fully expect to flourish. They have Dalvin Cook on that offense. Kirk Cousins, a very solid quarterback in his own right. You have Adam Thielen lining up on the other side. They just brought in Christian Darrisaw to, shore up that offensive line over there. And Minnesota. So, I mean, the sky's the limit for Justin Jefferson. I think that he has solidified himself as the number one guy in Minnesota just based off his rookie year alone. And I'm sure that, especially the Vikings probably didn't know what they had right away with Justin Jefferson, but as they went through the year, they realized, all right, this is a guy we're going to have to be game planning around. And I mean, that 1, 2, 3 punch that they got over there in Cook, Thielen, and Jefferson, Minnesota's offense, if that offensive line can really put it together, is going to be dominant. That is all I've got to say about that. But Justin Jefferson sitting at number 4, very happy with where I put him on the list. I feel he deserves it. He obviously doesn't have a little bit of tenure. There's not the constant production year over year that a lot of, or pretty much everyone on this list has aside from him. But, you don't have as dominant of a rookie year as he did without the idea that, okay, he's probably going to continue to be dominant going forward throughout the remainder of his career. You can't just step into the spotlight the way he did and then just disappear in the following year. I have a hard time believing that's going to happen for him. Now, coming in at number 3, the yards leader, and you could argue maybe one of the best wide receivers in the league, and I would say he is definitely deserving of his number 3 spot minimum. You could argue him for number 2 or 1, depending on who you are and who you root for. But Stefon Diggs, man, he had a coming out party last year over there in Buffalo. 127 catches, a 76.5% completion percentage coming his way, or reception percentage, 1,535 yards, 12.1 yards per catch, and he had a nice 8 touchdowns to boot as well. Stefon Diggs, the reason I'm putting him at number 3 and not at the number 2 or 1 spot is because the people that he is behind just have a more dominant resume over the last few years compared to him. And I think that these 2 guys that are ahead of him are also right in their prime and are, just putting in numbers year in and year out. And, as much as I love the way Stefon Diggs played, and honestly, you could argue that he played the position maybe the best out of everyone, depending on who you talk to. I'm going to give credence to the resumes for the last few years of the next 2 guys that are ahead of him. But I mean, Stefon Diggs is an absolute monster. The pairing with Josh Allen, that, if you saw the way that Buffalo was throwing the football last year, it was unbelievable. The real only issue that I can really identify over in Buffalo is just that running game needs to get it together. You have somebody like Devin Singletary there who, everyone seemed to thought was going to be a stud, and he has not quite produced to the level they need to. And I mean, if you watch, especially towards the later part of the year where teams start to rely on the running game a little bit more, it felt like they were just giving the ball to Josh Allen and throwing the football. And I think ultimately that's kind of what kept them from making it to the Super Bowl, especially in that game against the Chiefs in the championship. They need to find a running game. And if they do, I mean, things are just going to only open up even more for that receiving game, which means Stefon Diggs could be looking at more catches, more yards, more touchdowns. They got to get that running game going. And I think that's the only thing that's going to really hinder Stefon Diggs from performing even better or putting up even higher numbers next season. Now, coming in at the number 2 spot, this is a guy that cannot be denied, and there's only one other person I have ahead of him who can deny him that number 1 spot, but he has been a damn good receiver his entire career. He's had terrible quarterbacks throwing his way for the majority of his career up until coming into, I don't want to say that because he did have, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. How is this happening? Deshaun Watson, He did have Deshaun Watson throwing the football to him a little bit while he was there in Houston, but for the most part, he had, a who's who of rotational quarterbacks just throwing the football to him. DeAndre Hopkins, who year in and year out, in my opinion, is an absolute stud at the wide receiver position and is arguably, or at least has been the last few years, arguably one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in the league. 115 catches, 71.9% reception percentage there. Every time the ball's going his way, I mean, the odds are he's probably catching it. You can see in this picture to my left here, the big famous catch that he had against Buffalo last year, one of the tough losses one of the very few losses Buffalo received last year. And I mean, DeAndre Hopkins absolutely shutting that game down with that catch. I mean, this picture right here honestly just defines and really, it shows you the type of player, the type of receiver that, DeAndre Hopkins has been his entire career, putting up ridiculous numbers no matter who was throwing him the football. And now that he has Kyler Murray and an offense that's already looking strong, they brought in AJ Green. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is right in the prime of his career. I have no reason to think that he's going to step back at all, and I think he's going to continue to put up the monster numbers that he has been. So shout out to him. Let's keep the ball rolling for DeAndre Hopkins. And now coming in at number 1, the only person I could really think of to put above DeAndre Hopkins on this list. He has been outstanding. And honestly, it's funny that it took up until this last year for him to really get the recognition he deserves. And maybe it's because of who's thrown him the football. But Davante Adams, in my opinion, is the absolute best wide receiver in the league. Hands down, no question. 18 touchdowns last year, nearly 12 yards per catch at 11.9. He had 1374 for receiving yards, 77.2% reception number there. So, I mean, almost so close to 80% of the catches coming his way being caught. I mean, the guy has sure hands, 115 receptions. He can move, he can separate, he can leap for the ball, contested. I mean, you name it, Davante Adams can do it, and he has been an absolute monster over there in Green Bay as a receiver. People go after Green Bay, and I have myself about them not getting a first-round wide receiver or something like that for Aaron Rodgers to throw to alongside Davante Adams. But, I mean, I guess if you want to rationalize why Green Bay hasn't gone after somebody is because they've had someone like Davante Adams the last few years catching the football. But I mean, goddamn, is he good? And I'll be damned if I let anyone say that Davante Adams is not the number 1 wide receiver. So please feel free to comment in the comment section down below what I got right and wrong on this list. Davante Adams is my number 1. I would love to see or hear what you guys have to say about who your top 5 wide receivers are in the league. Who did I miss out on? Who belongs on this list? Who doesn't belong on this list? Let me know. And as always, like, comment, share, subscribe. I am Athan Hristodulu. I appreciate you all for taking your time to watch the show. I'll catch you guys later with another video. Have a good one.